Hello, and thank you for taking the time to join us once more in the map room for another one of our map room briefings, where today we are talking about cyber security, or more specifically, cyber and the small business. As you all know, I like to put context behind these conversations, and the reason we want to do this one today is last month we had two things that brought this to the forefront, really. We had a lot of chat in our MAP client WhatsApp group, lots of people asking about cyber, asking about potential solutions, asking about training in some areas. And also we had the Bulletproof event on the 1st of May, and our friends at Riskbox did a presentation specifically on this area. And they came out with some stats that I think were really worth understanding and explaining the reason for this, which was across the last 12 months, they'd had 166 claims from their agency clients. The highest number of which was property claims, the usual damaged a laptop, done a monitor, something. And that was at 32%. And just 4% of those claims were in the cyberspace. Maybe that's as we would expect, and maybe this isn't the issue that people want to tell us it is. But then, when we flipped it in terms of value, the story really changed, and the eyebrows in the room certainly raised. And that was to say that when looking at value, property suddenly was only 11% of the value of the claims, and cyber had jumped up to 29%, which was significant. And the largest claim, in fact, they dealt with last year was in excess of £250,000 specifically on cyber. So I think that clearly shows it's of growing concern to all of our clients and lots of other small business owners out there. So I'm delighted to say today we've got our subject matter expert is Stephen. Stephen Mann is from Neal, which is a Manchester-based consultancy specialising in this area, and he hopefully is going to help us demyth and debug some of the thoughts and concerns around cyber today. So Stephen, how are you? Thank you so much for giving your time up for the map room today.
Well, thank you for having me on, Stuart, and I'm very well, thank you. How about yourself?
Yes, I'm good, thank you. I'm trying to stay in and out of the rain, as we said earlier, but I'm sure we'll survive.
Of course.
On the podcast, Steve, we've always said we like subject matter experts and we like people who've been there. For people who do and don't know, just briefly explain who or what is Parker Neal.
So, Parker Neal, still relatively new organisation. We founded in 2022. Our two co-founders, Dave Parker and Gareth Neal, they are ex-end user. So Gareth was a CISO in an organisation. Dave was a DPO in an organisation. And they saw in their experience, both there but also from previous lives as consultants within the likes of the Big Four, they saw there was a really big gap in the market for the provision of both cyber services but cyber intelligence to that lower end of the SME market. So typically, talk 500 people and down within organization, all the way down to micro businesses, startups, that sort of space. The industry's kind of focused on the enterprise level organizations that can make them a lot of money. So this underserviced area of the business market wasn't getting the service it needed, wasn't getting the intel it needed, and ultimately was kind of left to its own devices or being drastically missold. So Parker Neal established really with the message and the ethos of we want to make cybersecurity more accessible for every company, lower that barrier to entry, and create solutions and services that were more cost and scale appropriate for that smaller business.
I think you just said something there that's really relevant, which is two things there: cost and scale appropriate. Our proposition at MAP is outsourced finance, and we always say it's about what you need at the time. You can go out and get a full finance function, you can use a bookkeeper, you might have someone doing your bookkeeping now. It's that point of, as somebody's growing their business, it's how do I get access to the solutions I need and the expertise that I need right now, and not maybe either, as you say, overpay or just be ignored. And as we all know, working in that enterprise space for many years, many vendors in that space simply are not interested in what they would call a subscale opportunity. So you are clearly our subject matter expert for today, and we've got the right people in the room, which is excellent. I want to talk about something that was said both at the Bulletproof event and I've seen said in other events, is people associate cyber very often with maybe the headlines that we'll see. So it's a cyber attack. It's an attack on data. It's all the way down to my sister-in-law who ran a sandwich shop, ran some demand that says we've turned your PC off, etc., etc. People tend to know cyber as an attack. Obviously, lots of other things about cyber are also around things like your data governance and things like your data privacy. And something that I've heard you talk about before is the concept of, well, it's also a risk to your revenue and your reputation. So I'd be interested in you explaining a little bit more of that for us, please, Steve.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The things that grab the headlines are attack. Let's use something relatively recent like M&S and Co-op. You know, we see the headlines there of here's a huge breach. There has been access gained to the organisation, and that's pretty much the sort of like the level of explanation that we get as the layperson from the media. What tends to happen in a breach such as that is threat actors, essentially hackers, if you want to use a more simplified term, will infiltrate an organization through whatever means it may be. The majority of times we see it's through something like phishing, which is where you see a social engineering attack. Somebody sends an email that looks like it's from somebody else, or it's got a link or an attachment that you shouldn't really click on, but you do. That then gives them access to your systems. And then, as we've seen with the Marks and Spencer and the Co-op attacks, those threat actors made that entry quite a long time ago. And what they've done is they've remained undetected in the systems for a long time, infiltrating the data and infiltrating the systems to see what they can get access to, turn off what they want, take the data that they want, hold to ransom, whatever it is that they can get there. Off the back of those breaches, there's then the onward effect. Because it's, you know, you think about your system you might be locked out of your system for a week. Okay, there's X amount of downtime. That's going to be a cost to you when it comes to your revenue. It's going to be a cost to you when it comes to your customer reputation. Let's say, for example, we'll take some examples actually from a study from last year. So from the cybersecurity breaches survey of 2024. So they looked
Bit of
SME.
light evening reading.
Oh, the sort of fun stuff that you have to consume when you're in my world, just to get an idea of where people are actually
Yeah.
where people are in danger. But it's what these guys do, and certainly like places like Infosecurity magazine and stuff like that, they make it quite digestible for the layperson as well, so you can get a good understanding. I would recommend people look at some of these publications because it is relatively easy reading. But yeah, off the back of
Where would
that
they
survey,
find them, Stephen? Apologies to cut across you,
no,
but
it's fine.
where would somebody find a publication like that?
So Infosecurity magazine is a really good one. So that's infosecurity-magazine.com.
Okay.
Really, really good. Loads of topics, loads of different features across their website. It's a really, really accessible publication. It's one that I look at every day. And if you wanted to do with a bit of learning, a bit more understanding of what happens in the cyber industry, it's a good one to take a look at. So yeah, so they put out a study, the survey last year in 2024. 58% of SMEs had reported a cyber breach, and I think it was 48% of micro organizations, so 9 people or less, 48% of them reported a breach as well. Across that cohort of the SME and the microservices, they reported a estimated loss of about £124,000 purely based on downtime. Now, it's much harder to record what the
Yeah.
reputational damage is, what the customer
Yeah.
loss, from a revenue perspective. It's much harder to calculate what that is without fast forwarding 3-5 years in the future, if your business even makes it that long post breach. So you can't really get a true representation of what that figure looks like. But I've known a lot of people, cybersecurity leaders, business leaders, who've worked in very well established organizations that have suffered high levels of breach, low levels of breach. It doesn't really matter. And within 6 months, 12 months, within a couple of years, those organizations have either gone south or they've had to go through a buyout or whatever it is, because the damage outside of the technical world of cyber
Yeah.
has been so mitigating to them allowing to grow and succeed as an organization. So I think sometimes it can be the case that there's a lot of mystification within cyber, that there's a lot of technical stuff, and it kind of becomes out of your sphere of consciousness. But when you look at it from the business perspective, when you look at it from the finance perspective, there's a lot of onward damage that can happen there. And that's why things like baseline levels of security knowledge, having a formation of a security posture within your business, having certain levels of compliance as laid out by the government, like Cyber Essentials, laid out by the NCSC, is a framework that you as an organization can work to be in compliance across and get a level of certification. It gives you a baseline that you are a certain level of secure. Things like that can be really, really important to help mitigate anything that might happen. You've got a baseline level of protection in, but it can also deter as well. Because if you've got that Cyber Essential certification and another company that a threat actor is looking
Yeah.
at doesn't have it, they're probably going to be the easier target. So it can be a level of deterrence as well. In the same instance as you put your
Alarm box on the
your
outside of
alarm
the
box
house.
on the front of your
Yeah,
house,
got it.
exactly. That's exactly what it can be. Um,
Got it.
but we talk about the other side of it as well, the positives, because I am not about the fear mongering stuff within the security world. I work with a lot of organizations that go through cyber essentials, but a lot of the other compliance standards frameworks as well, to attain certification so they can go and win other clients, so they can
Yes.
access different levels of organization, because it's becoming something as we move forward that companies are expecting everyone in their supply chain to prove a level of resilience. We're going to see that rolling more and more because there are regulations over in the EU that are expanding and are naturally going to have a knock-on effect for us here in the UK. But companies want to see that you're resilient, want to see that you have a level of cybersecurity awareness, and having things like those certifications can actually unlock loads of revenue for you. So it's not just be careful, get this, and it'll help. It's actually no,
Yeah.
there are benefits to this as well.
I wanted to come back to, so what you're saying there is that taking away the big headlines, so taking away, as you say, the M&S, the Co-op, and the big Sky News or 6 O'Clock News headlines, the reality is there. So what you're saying is that the majority of small businesses, but nearly half of micro enterprises have had a problem. So it's clearly an issue, and therefore people's, let's just say, maybe anxiety is heightened or whatever it is. I'd be interested in your thoughts on what you think the greatest either mistakes or misconceptions are. So, how much is the industry potentially smoke and mirrors when there's a problem? But what's the sort of misconceptions at the small business owner level? Is it it'll never happen to me? Is it, I'll get myself trained and I'll be fine? Give me your thoughts on that, please.
Do you know what? It's very different for every organization, but ultimately because a lot of cybersecurity is human driven, it's not necessarily technology driven as you might assume it is. It is different dependent on the individual. I'll give you some examples though, and you kind of hit the points on a couple of them there. So a lot of people think it's not going to happen to them. Well, I mean, the numbers are
Yeah,
showing that this is growing. So if you reverse those numbers that I gave back, 58% at SME, 48% at micro organization. You go back the year before, I think, and I will make sure I'm saying this correctly, 32% of businesses reported a breach in 2023. So we're talking about a really, really large portion of growth in that phase. So if you think it's not going to happen to you, the likelihood is at some point someone might try. And I guess when we talk about cyber attacks, it's probably good to understand like the three different levels of attacker that you might have. You might just get the chancer. Someone sat in their basement going, can I get access to their system? They might not be necessarily doing it for any criminal intent or anything like that. They just want to test their skills. So you've got someone who's doing it from that perspective. You've got the criminal organization who want to do it purely for monetary gain and for disruption. They want to, try and ransom your organization. Then the other side is the state-led attack, which we can assume, given a lot of what we see in the news, is what is causing those large level attacks. Depending on what your organization does, a certain threat state might see you as a really, really valuable attack because you're plugged into healthcare. Let's say, if you're a service provider into the NHS and they can get access to you, unfortunately, they can utilize your connection to them to get access to them as well. So even if you're a relatively small company, you might have 40 people within your business and you provide a supply chain access into a high level target, it's not just the chancers, it's not just criminals, but state level actors might be looking at you as well. So some of the misconceptions, absolutely, it's not going to be us. Some people think, and some people rightly think, I'm going to take this on myself, I'm going to learn it, and I'm going to implement it in the business. And it works. Some people think like that, do the bare minimum, and actually they've had no effects on maturing the cybersecurity within their organization. One of the things that I think from a business perspective we set out to do was make sure where this other issue happens, where people go out, buy a solution, they think that this is going to be the thing that saves them and makes them safe, they get oversold, they get overpromised and ultimately underdelivered. So they've paid a whack out amounts of money and nothing's really happened because there's not been effects on the stuff internally. I think the other misconception is once you've done something to do with cybersecurity in your business, you are now secure.
Yeah.
And it just isn't the case. We'll use the same analogy we used before. The alarm on the front of your house is a deterrent. It is a way to alert you and other people nearby if somebody tries to break into your house. But ultimately, it doesn't stop someone breaking into your house. It allows you to mitigate what happens when they do. It alerts other people to try and help them mitigate what it is that is happening, but it doesn't stop it. And that is exactly the same with whatever cybersecurity service, solution, compliance, certification you've got. You're doing the right stuff, but you are not secure. It's an ongoing process that you go, okay, well, now I'm going to invest in a tougher lock for someone to break to. And that's going through this level of cybersecurity service. Okay, now we're going to improve our windows and make them shatterproof. Okay, right, we're going to go with that. It's that constant work that you need to do. So if you've done something, you are not just automatically secure. Yeah, they're probably some of the misconceptions.
And so that's, if you like, maybe sits on the side of the owner, the side of the business owner, as you say, my misconception or my error here. The other thing is, if there's so many, and this might just be because of the size of the opportunity, but if there's so many attacks, is there a in your experience, is there a common weak point? But what's your views on, let's just use the phrase common entry points?
That's it. Like I said, so much about cybersecurity is human led. So if you look at breaches in the last year, I think the figure, I don't have it to hand immediately, but I'm pretty sure it's about 92% of all breaches were started off the back of phishing and social engineering campaigns. So when you think about that, obviously the issue is with the human, it's with knowledge, it's with practice, it's with awareness, but also it's then having the internal controls that if that does happen, what happens next, all of that sort of thing. It's very easy for people in certainly the cybersecurity world to go, well, just check if it's a phishing email. But unfortunately, it's not the reality, particularly for small businesses, where quite often people are wearing a number of different hats and they're very, very busy. So it's really easy just to see that email come through that says your MD's name. You don't think about checking it. There's a link there and you just click it. It's really, really easy to do. Yeah, phishing and social engineering, absolutely the key entry point when it comes to cybersecurity. We can try to do what we do. Like we do a lot of training and awareness. We run phishing simulation campaigns for companies, things like that, where we try to educate people on what these things look like and what to watch out for, just to bring it to the forefront of your mind when you're opening each email, when you're answering the phone. Things like if you're at an event, are you the sort of person who's going around scanning QR codes? You're giving people access. Do you know what I mean? That's a way for someone to get access to your business. So that's absolutely key number one. It's about the education stuff, making sure people are more aware, more savvy, what to look for, taking that split second just to go, does that ring exactly true? Is there anything there that I should be concerned about? But then from a business perspective, making sure you've got the controls, the response plan, and worst
Yeah,
comes to worst, the recovery plan if something does
yeah,
happen to mitigate when it does happen. Because if 92% of all breaches start with that, it's going to happen anyway, no matter how much you invest in your training,
yeah,
no matter what systems you're using. It is going to happen. Someone's going to make a mistake at one point because we are all human. We all make errors. I forget
yeah,
to unload the dishwasher and my wife goes mad at me. It's exactly the same. We all make errors day to day, and that's totally fine. But then once you've got the awareness, the training, you've got the controls, you've got everything in place that you should have at a basic level, it's then about creating a culture where people don't feel like making that mistake should be hidden. You've got to disclose it, because
yeah.
if
That's
you, if you
big.
click on something and it goes, that's not right, or it's downloaded something on my computer I didn't think it was going to download, you've got to tell the right person ASAP, because you can mitigate that. You can mitigate that entire breach by getting out ahead of it, shutting it off, turning off whatever it is, and making sure it's isolated. And that culture that isn't a blame game, that isn't a shame game, but actually you just go, I've made a mistake, I've clicked this, can someone deal with it? And then you pass it off and either your team deal with it or your service provider deals with it. It's so important. And I think that's a huge bit of the cybersecurity journey that companies miss out on, is creating that positive culture around security.
That makes a lot of sense. But obviously, that in terms of it is as much to do with, as you say, the culture you're developing
Of course.
in your business as anything else, and the fear of or the safe space to own a mistake. You mentioned a few things there, which is the sort of first of all the concept of understanding it, so getting yourself trained, maybe implementing some solutions, and you mentioned something there which is a recovery plan. The point that suddenly we've pressed it, it's been fixed, is not always the same answer. How long does it take? So for someone to address this, and if you say, let's say, get the other side of a problem for a small business, let's just say, a mid-sized agency, 20 people, and let's put the culture side, or maybe let's not put the culture side away because that matters. How long does it take to address these risks, address these issues, and get yourself in a more confident position?
Not that long, to be totally frank. I think a lot of messaging from my industry would suggest it's very, very complex, it's very difficult, and ultimately it's very costly.
Yeah,
Whereas if the provision that you are working with, if it's, like I say, if it's a business like ours, that barrier to entry is a lot lower. Getting something like, you probably start with like a gap analysis. Okay, where are you now? Where do we need you to be? Let's get some compliance documentation written. Let's make sure we've got some controls and processes in place. Let's have a look at a level of certification. You can probably get that done within a couple of months, 2, 3 months, maybe, potentially a little bit longer if you're a really complex estate. And you can do that with relative ease. Obviously, there's a level of time investment from you as the agency, because you need to work hand in hand with your service provider to make sure they've got access, they can see what they need to see, and everything is then documented and controlled in the right way. But it's not an overly arduous process to at least start the journey. Once you've started the journey, it's great. It's easier then to do the next bit and the next bit and the next bit. That first kickoff start is probably the toughest and lengthiest portion,
yeah.
but we're not talking a 2 year journey to at least start. And if you started, you're further ahead than quite a lot of people already are. So yeah, not overly arduous, not overly costly, not overly demanding on a business at all.
Interesting, because I think one thing that, well, I know speaking to clients and to other business owners, one of the things that hold people back making that first step is, as you said at the outset, it won't happen to me. Now, we know that the stats are now proving that it's actually more
Unfortunately.
likely to happen to you than you think it is. But there's the point of the once I open this door and I'll do get my systems checked, and we're all running something probably in our systems that are the oldest piece of software, and yes, the network is only as strong as its weakest link and all the rest of it.
Yeah, cool.
But what's your advice for the business owner who sits there and says, but if I open that Pandora's box, if I open this cyber envelope, is it a never-ending cost? Is it a never-ending cycle of time, investment, etc.? I think that's what is holding a lot of people back.
I'm with you. So I'm not going to lie, to an extent it is. My advice would be to work at the scale that you need to work, and don't go and get lost in the weeds. The industry will try to sell people stuff that they don't need. Will try to sell levels of protection and guarantees of security of this solution or this pane of glass or this or this or this, whatever it might be. It can be endless. But to be totally frank, with the sort of people that we're talking to, digital agencies of this sort of scale, and a lot of it you just don't need. A lot of it can be done in-house at relatively low scale and low cost. It doesn't mean it's not something that you have to invest in continuously. So let's say, for example, Cyber Essential certification. You get that certification. That really only shows that you are secure on that day.
Yes.
That's why they ask you to do audits every year. And that's why you should stay on top of this and make sure there are regular reviews of what it is that you're doing. If you think about things like, obviously, if you're a software driven agency, you're probably doing something around pen testing already. It's like that. It's like if you pen test X system that you're using or X solution that you've built, well, then tomorrow there's more code going into it and there's more work being done on it. So it's changed. Now, I'm not suggesting in any way that you should be pen testing all the time, but doing it regularly just to make sure that things are not overly changed, or okay, we're bringing this new implementation in, let's run a test and make sure we've not left any gaps. It's things like that where it's ongoing and continuous. But if you're not a big enterprise company, you don't need to sink hundreds of thousands of pounds into this cost center all the time. There's an outlay, and then you can probably run it relatively annually low continual costs.
Yeah.
The same way, like, again, we'll use the same analogy. Your subscription to your alarm provider who has 24/7 access, so when an alarm goes off, they can deploy emergency services. It's relatively low cost, but it's just that level of maintenance to make sure you're ongoing secure.
I suppose we're all comfortable paying, let's just use car insurance. Now, we may say, people will say car insurance is mandatory. So use house insurance, whatever insurance you want. We're all used to certain levels, and people are nervous about until it costs them money. And so if you go back to that risk box saying that the largest claim last year was 250k, and that would not have been a very large agency.
No, not at all.
It's that point, isn't it? It's sitting back, and maybe this is where something like your gap analysis comes in, which is, well, understanding what the risk is to you, as well as the risk to your systems, the risk to, as you say, your revenue, the risk to your reputation, particularly if you're in that supply chain. Probably, again, another issue which agencies particularly need to look at. It's okay having your staff trained, but we all use freelancers on a particular job. How do you maybe onboard that freelancer? And maybe that, again, is where training, etc., comes in. I suppose you've said there about, and maybe it's the same answer, Steve, which is sort of topping up. When do you know enough is enough? I suppose one of these things is, and as you say, the industry is great at, and every time there's a headline, there'll be another series of emails going out saying, "Are you secure?" etc., etc.
Yeah, of course it will be.
How much is enough, or is that do you know what? It's about just understanding your risks, because maybe you can mitigate, but you can't make yourself bomb-proof, can you?
No. I think to add to what I just said, I think it's important that you work with someone that you can trust has the right interest in mind in moving forward. I think trust is a huge thing, and I think having worked within cybersecurity for as long as I have, unfortunately, there are a lot of snake oil salesmen out there. There are a lot of people that are only focused purely on revenue, and their entire rationale is to sell you as much as possible,
Yeah.
which is where,
Or only have one product to sell.
or only
This
have
is a
one product to
classic
sell.
product versus solution, isn't
Yeah,
it? You know, vendor A will tell you why not to buy vendor B's product, not
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, or it's a reseller, and they're only focused on selling their highest margin products. I think a lot of it, you have to have trust, and you have to build trust with someone, either through, you might hire internally, or you might work with an advisory organization, but you have to trust that they have your best interests at heart. um I think that ongoing acceptance of this is something that we need to have a look at, and continually having that trusted party giving you the right advice, telling you what you need and what you don't need, be that their products or not. I think that's absolutely essential, because ultimately you can't know what you don't know. I think trust is a huge thing for you as an organization. Make sure you're working with someone who is reputable, who is trusted. Make sure you're working with someone who you get the right feeling from. I've been in the room with some people, clients of ours, who have worked with or have considered alongside us other suppliers, and they've come off going, there's not a chance we're going to look at them, because they just don't get the right feeling. And because it's so human driven, it's behavior driven, it's personal in terms of the investment in your business. You've got to have that human connection, and I think that's where the trust happens. So that would be a big thing for me to advise people on, is make sure you're happy with the person, make sure you're happy with what it is that they are bringing to you, and can you trust them, and feel them out as well, test them. See if, throw some things their way that you don't need, but see if they try and sell to you on it.
That's a really interesting point. I suppose that comes back to this thing, which again we see a lot in our industry, which is this the line between products and solutions versus advisory. And lots of people believe, in my experience, and people will say I'm biased because I have a service business, but in my experience, and I say that because I am the fool that did this 20 years ago, thought, do you know what? I can cut out the middleman. I can save myself some money. I can go and buy the product or solution direct, not appreciating and respecting the role of the advisor, which is all the things you just said there. Do they have my interests at heart? Can they help me find a better solution? And I'm sure that's absolutely the case here, that
Of
people
course
can
it
either
is.
look at the brands that we've all seen for years, or they just trust the advice because it's technical, and none of us want to admit we don't know what we don't know. That psychology of sales,
Yeah,
which is
it's
fascinating.
you're absolutely spot on, and I think, like, from the advisory stuff that we do, because like, we're kind of three different areas: advisory, consultation, and services. But in the advisory side, we've sat with our clients and we've scoped out solutions external of us, because there's only so much we do. We don't do everything. We know where our value add is for that smaller business, and we stay there. But when our customers grow, which inevitably some of them do, they need things that are out of our reach. So
Yeah,
our founder, Gareth, who's the ex-CISO, he's really hands-on in this piece. He will sit there and he will screen what it is you're looking for, and then scope it out with all the providers, because he is that trusted advisor for the people that he's working with. And I think that's really, really important, because he's making sure you're not getting fleeced as a company.
yes,
Yeah, it's
yes.
absolutely vital.
Yeah, interesting. How much has AI changed this landscape?
Of course it has an impact, the same way it has an impact on every element of technology, every element of business. Of course it has an impact. I think, to use the term again, beware of the snake oil,
Yeah,
because everybody will tell you that their new AI solution, or their AI busting cybersecurity solution, or a lot of it's not worth the sand it's built on. Ultimately, a lot of the things that come with AI stem similarly off controls and cybersecurity problems that are the same as data, software,
yeah,
infrastructure. It's not overly dissimilar. It's a larger problem, but it's not an overly dissimilar problem.
no.
Um, One of the areas that people don't talk about much when it comes to AI, we hear, oh, all of this stuff going on. I actually think it's more of a compliance issue to really have a knock-on effect, rather than a technical cybersecurity issue. In some elements, don't get me wrong, in others it's the other way around. But when you think about compliance, AI's got huge ramifications when it comes to ethics, when it comes to data usage, when it comes to the potentially, I don't know what your organizations are doing, but when it comes to maybe the use of client data, there are so many ethics questions that the AI raises. And that to me, certainly from the world that we work in, that to me is something that needs to be built in as a core piece of your compliance stuff, rather than worrying too much about the technical element. We find our way through the technical element naturally, as you do with any problem. But there are huge ethics things that need to be built into the compliance, and that's where I think AI really is not being talked about enough. We all talk about the brilliant technical applications that you can have with it, and that's great. But what about that other side? Are you doing what you should be doing? Are you by accident not doing what you should be doing? And it's making sure that all of that piece complies with specific standards.
I suppose it brings us back to where you started, Steve, which is that first of all, it's part of your data governance, but it's
Yeah,
also that we've all learned about the phishing emails now. I say to so many people, particularly in the industry we represent, okay, you go to. I'm only going to use ChatGPT as the example. I know there are other things. So you've gone on, you've got some idea, you've got some feedback, and you've not realised that you've just shared that information with however many other people potentially. AI and IP protection is probably another subject matter altogether for another day. But it is concerning that I think people are as quick today to jump on the AI as they were to open that dodgy PDF 3 or 4 years ago. So I think we'll leave it on that one. True. Okay. Um, I think one of the things I wanted to ask was, how do you demystify this? But I think probably, in fairness, we've covered quite a bit of that, and I'm conscious of time because we're trying to keep these briefings, including the title, brief. I suppose the easiest way to ask this is what what steps should a business owner take today? I've heard from you today, which sounds a great idea for it, is get a gap analysis done. So first of all, get an analysis done, understand where you are, let somebody who knows what they're doing give you some advice. That's what I've taken away from this. But what else do you think a business owner should take from today?
the simple bit of advice that I say to everyone is just don't accept inaction. Because to assume that everything's going to be okay, to do nothing about it, to not
Yeah,
seek advice, to not
yeah.
get someone who knows, to at least just, have a chat with you, that level of inaction is what might cost you in the long run. Now, you might go, okay, I'm going to have a chat with someone. So someone might say, I want to have a chat with Stephen. Come and have a natter with me. First off, from a demystification perspective, I'm never, as hopefully here, I never really talk super tech when it comes to cybersecurity. I talk a lot in plain language, so we can at least have a conversation that both of us understand. But we can see where your risk appetite is. Where are you happy to accept that, okay, we can afford to do this, and actually if this goes wrong, that kills the business, so we need to make sure that's safe, and we need to do this, we need to do that, but that I can afford. If it goes wrong, it goes wrong. We can work out where your risk appetite is, and then you can decide where to move forward with it. Like I said, my biggest piece of advice is don't let inaction today stop you doing what could be absolutely spot on for your business, because you either don't know or you were too afraid to ask. You didn't want to open the Pandora's box, like you said before. Just ask the question.
Yeah, very valid information, wise wisdom. So, if someone wants to do that, Stephen, how do they find you?
So I'm findable. I'm on LinkedIn, Stephen with a PH, Mann, MANN. I haven't got the dorky orange glasses on LinkedIn though, but you'll see me there. As you mentioned, I work at Parker Neal. You can obviously find us on LinkedIn there as well, or you can head to parkerneal.com. But yeah, you can get in touch with me. You can drop me an email on sman, so it's SMAN at parkerneal.com. Neal is Neal as well, just to point that out. And I'm more than happy to have a chat with anybody, just kind of find out where you are. If you want to ask any questions, I can easily give up some time to have an initial chat with anybody. That's totally fine.
Excellent, thank you. I think what you've said there, and I would say the same thing to everyone. Take advantage of that because it is about understanding. But the reason I wanted Stephen on today was it is about that. No sort of industry jargon. It's very plain speaking. I try and do the same when it comes to talking about, governance, board governance, or I'm not an accountant, but finance matters. I try to do the same thing to keep it simple, because people are afraid of accepting or advice if they don't understand it. So I think that's good.
Exactly.
If you've got a concern out there, if you've got something you're not sure about, then track someone like Stephen down and have that conversation, even if it only puts your mind at rest. Stephen, thank you so much today. Really do appreciate you giving up your time and your knowledge. For everyone listening, I hope it's been useful, and we'll see you back in the map room for another briefing very soon. Bye for now.